office is Student Legal Services. It's located on the 4th floor of the Student Union in room 411 next to the Dean of Students suite. Can everybody hear me okay? Our presentation today is going to be on landlord-tenant issues. It's going to be pretty informal, so if you have a question as I go along, feel free to raise your hand and stop me, and I'll answer your questions as I go along. The main focus for this presentation today is just to give you a brief introduction into what to look for when you're trying to sign a lease. Because we have lots of students who come in our office that have, I would say landlord-tenant issues are the #1 issue of issues that students come in with that they have to confront. So I want to make sure that you have the knowledge to go in when you get ready to sign your lease, know what to look for, and if things aren't right, be able to negotiate and be in the best position. Okay? So one of the things that I wanted to start off with is in your packet on the second sheet after the first sheet, the introduction sheet says, landlord-tenant seminar, an important relationship, learn to make it bloom, don't sign your life away. I want you to briefly look at the cartoon there. It says, and this must be the pool you mentioned in the ad, and look at the pool. What's wrong with that? Okay, so a lot of times with technology and everything like that, you see all these beautiful pictures of what an apartment complex looks like on the internet, and then you get there and you're like, really? Is this really what I signed up for? The #1 thing that I would say that you should not do is lease a property sight unseen. Always make sure that before you sign a lease, you go to the property, look at it. Not just look at it and not even just look at the plans and things that they show you. Ask to see an actual unit, because what they're showing you on paper might not be the actual unit that they're renting to you. So if you can, always insist that you see either the unit they're going to rent to you or a unit that is totally comparable to one that you will be leasing. That's #1, okay? Before you even get ready to go sign the lease, there's a couple of simple things that you need to be aware of. In most apartment complexes, especially in university communities, they're going to require you to have something that's called a guarantor. Does anybody know what a guarantor is? What's the guarantor?
It's like someone, in case you can't pay your rent, somebody else can.
Right. So you have to have a cosigner. Kind of like if you're buying a car and you don't have a lot of established credit, they want someone to cosign for you. So you're going to want to think about if you don't have enough income to meet the income requirements, because some apartment complexes have a certain income level requirement that you have to meet, you want to think about who your guarantor is going to be. Not only do you want to think about who that person is, but you also have to make sure that that person is a credit-worthy person. They should know their credit score before you sign them up to be your guarantor. Because one of the things that our students run into is the apartment complex requires a guarantor. You sign the lease, and then your guarantor fails because they can't meet the requirements for the credit check or the background check. You're still stuck with that apartment, whether you can find someone or not. So that's a common question we get. If I sign the lease and I can't find a guarantor, can I get out of my lease? And the answer to that is no. So you want to make sure whoever you list as your guarantor is someone who you know will be able to be qualified to be the guarantor. The other thing is, and this is something common that we see, a lot of apartment leases are having you do the leasing process online. The old way to sign a lease was usually you would sign what's called an application, and the application just has your information on it, your income information and things like that, and you'd sign it and you'd give like a $50 deposit, something like that, and then they would run it and they say, yes, you're qualified, no, you're not qualified, yes, if you're qualified, let's sign your lease. Now they're being a little bit more clever with it. What they're having you do a lot of times, and especially the apartment communities that are catered to college students, it's an all-in-one. It's an application and a lease. So a lot of students think that they're signing the application, but it's really a lease. So make sure that you read everything. Never just scroll through the pages because it looks like it's a lot to read. Make sure you understand whether or not you're signing an application or a lease. Because an application is not technically legally binding, but a lease is. So if you just signed a lease and paid your deposit, you can change your mind typically. But if you sign a lease, one of the main things I want to impress upon you is there's no 3 days later and you can change your mind. Once you sign the lease, that apartment is yours. And the only way to get out of it is to find someone else who can take over the lease for you, which is a sublet, and you have to get permission from the landlord to do that. Or if there's a death, and even if there's a death, sometimes estates are required to finish paying out the remainder of the lease. Or if you're in the military and you have leave paperwork and you're transferred. Those are one of the few ways to get out of a lease. It is very difficult to get out of a lease. So that's why we really have to know what we're looking for and make sure that we are aware of the different provisions that are contained in the lease. If anybody wants to have their lease reviewed, we do that at Student Legal Services. If you're thinking about signing a lease, just call our office. You can schedule an appointment, or every Wednesday we have open legal clinic from 8:30 to 1, from 8:30 to noon, and 1 to 3:30. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
What about graduates?
Graduate students, you qualify for the services as well. So, and all of our services are free. It doesn't cost you anything to use Student Legal Services. So please come see us. We'll review your leases with you if you have provisions that you don't understand. Some of the main provisions that you need to think about when you look at your lease, and they'll come back to you again later, is look at the provision about how much notice you have to give. Some of you guys are probably coming down to the end of your lease and you're trying to decide, do I want to renew my lease or do I want to go somewhere else? Because typically every year it's the landlord's prerogative to raise the rent, right? They could raise the rent on you. They have to give you notice. It's their right to do it. But you might say, hey, you know what? I really don't want to pay an extra $75 a month. I probably need to find a new place to stay. Make sure a couple of months, you know when the end of your lease is, and then go back to your lease contract and look at how many days notice that you have to give the landlord in order to terminate your lease. It used to be 30 days was the standard. Now we're getting 30, 60, I've seen several 90-day provisions where you have to give 3 months notice. So always check your lease. If your lease is one of what we call the standard Texas Association leases, you can usually find it in the 3rd paragraph. It'll say you have to give 90 days notice. And also keep in mind that that notice has to be in writing. I would always urge each of you, anytime you communicate with your landlord, even if it's a little thing, put it in writing. Send an email, okay? And that gives you a paper trail and you know what's going on. And when they say, well, I didn't get that notice, you can say, hey, I have the email, and you can pull it up and show that you gave that notice. So the notice has to be written. If the notice period is for anything typically over 60 days, which a lot of them are going to 90 days, in addition to providing that 90 days written notice, your landlord has to provide you with a reminder prior to that 90-day period saying, hey, your 90-day period is coming up. Just want to remind you that you need to let me know if you're going to stay or if you're going to go. If they don't do that, and if they don't provide that to you in writing, then that gives you the right, if you have the provision in your lease, to only have to provide 30 days notice to the landlord of whether you want to stay or go. So usually that comes up in a situation where someone decides towards the end that they want to leave, and the landlord's like, well, you didn't give me the proper notice, and then we look at the lease and see if that provision's in there. But a lot of the new leases, there's a provision that states that in there. So look at your notice provisions. Okay, so you found your apartment complex, you've signed your lease, you're getting ready to move in. Some of the things that you need to look for when you get ready to move in is, one of the first things that you're going to be handed is something called an inventory sheet. Take time with your inventory sheet. It will save you a whole lot of money, okay? When they give you the inventory sheet, and there's a sample inventory sheet in your folder, you'll be able to find it. What the inventory sheet does is you go around to each room, look at each corner, closet, everything of your apartment, and note everything that's wrong. If the paint is chipped, if there's a stain on the wall, if there's a stain on the carpet in the living room, you want to note it. Because what happens is, at the end, when you get ready to move out, remember you paid your security deposit? When you get ready to move out, you want your security deposit back, right? Because you're going to need it for the new place or helping you with moving expenses and stuff. Well, what happens is a lot of times apartment complexes try to find every reason to keep your security deposit. They'll charge you, well, we had to clean the carpet, you left the bathroom dirty, you left the kitchen dirty, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. There was a broken blind, okay? A lot of times students want to come in and dispute the charges, and the first thing I ask for is that inventory form, because if I can show that you documented on the inventory form that something was broken or not right, then they can't charge you for that at the end of the lease. So you always want to make sure that you take time with that inventory form. And that's also your record of the condition of how the apartment was turned over to you. If things are not right within those first, they usually give you 24 to 48 hours to turn in your inventory sheet. It'll say on your sheet when it needs to be turned in. Make sure you turn it in within that time frame. Another issue that's coming up that's kind of common is we're having to deal with bed bugs, right? Well, apartment complexes, several of them are having students sign what's called a bedbug addendum. And in the bedbug addendum, it says that you have 48 hours within moving into your apartment to let your landlord know if you have bed bugs or not. If you don't let them know that you have bed bugs within that 48-hour period, if you acquire them, then you're responsible for paying for the treatment. And if the bed bugs go into other people's apartments, you're responsible for paying for their treatment too. So what I recommend to students is before you move in any type of furniture or any of your items, if you have that bed bug addendum attached to your lease, that you hire a exterminator, yes, I couldn't think of the word, that you hire an exterminator to come in and inspect before you move in your things and give you a clean bill of health in terms of bed bugs, okay? Because that might save you money down the road, okay?
How much do you estimate that costs?
It's probably $50, $75, somewhere around there. It's not expensive, but it's well worth it because bed bug treatments, it's hard to get rid of bed bugs, and people who have had to do it, it's a couple of $100s per treatment, and you usually have to have 2 or 3 treatments to get rid of them, and it's just not something you want to go through. Now, not every lease has this in it, but it's something that you want to look to see if there is a provision related to it. If there's not a provision related to it in the lease, it kind of gets iffy as to who's responsible for paying for those fees. So it's something that you really want to keep in mind and look for and inspect when you move into your apartment. Now, so you're in your apartment, everything's going good, something needs to be repaired. What do you do if you need a repair? Anybody? Call maintenance, all right? Not only do I want you to call maintenance, I want you to send maintenance an email and put it in writing, whatever your repair is. Because like a lot of people call, but calls get missed, messages get left, things are forgotten. But I want you to get in the habit of writing things down. Send the email. Some apartments require you to put your maintenance request in writing. If it's something super serious, like it's in the middle of the summer and it's 105 degrees and you have no AC, make sure you put it in writing. There are local codes in that state that you can't go without having air in your apartment. It has to be at least under 80-something degrees in your apartment. So if it's 100 degrees outside and you don't have any air, that's a health and safety issue. So if you guys encounter that and it's been more than a day or two, come to our office. You have rights. We can write what's called a health and safety demand letter. With the health and safety demand letter, the landlord has to make the repair within what's considered to be a reasonable time. The law says that a reasonable time is 7 days. If they cannot cure things that materially affect your health, safety, and welfare within that 7-day period, you may have grounds to terminate your lease. But you don't want to do that on your own, okay? Because there's several different requirements. You have to make sure that your rent is paid in full, that you're paid up. If you have a problem, don't just not pay your rent. We see so many students who say, well, I didn't pay my rent because they're not doing this, this, that, and the other. And I understand that you're frustrated because the landlord's not doing what they're supposed to do. But you have to be current on your rent to be protected under the Texas Property Code, to have any remedies. The legislature recently put in some new laws to help tenants that, you know, like if there's repairs that need to be made and the landlord is not doing them, you can take your landlord to JP court and make them do the repairs and then make them pay your reasonable attorney's fees and stuff like that. So that's what we're here for. If you run into these types of issues, call our office, come in and do an open legal clinic or schedule an appointment, and we'll assist you with working through these various things that come up in terms of getting repairs and stuff done. So don't worry too much about the repairs. They're slow to get them done in a lot of these complexes and stuff like that. But just make sure you document everything in writing, and then make sure that you come talk to us as soon as possible, especially if it's something serious that's a health and safety issue, because usually we can get those fixed pretty fast. And we've even had some students that have been able to terminate their leases because it's just been really bad. Stuff falling apart, we call code compliance, they're not compliant, they can't comply, and then they're able to get out of their lease. So, document everything, right? Some other kind of common myths and things that come out. Make sure you know when your rent is due. Usually the landlord gives you a grace period. A lot of leases, even though your rent is due on the 1st, it'll say you won't incur late charges until after the 3rd. Well, if you've been complaining about your apartment and calling code compliance, even though they say that they'll take your money up until the 3rd, they're looking for ways to evict you. So make sure you pay your money on time. Make sure you pay your rent on time. Sometimes if you're having a hard time, talk to your landlord. Sometimes they will work with you. Just communicate with them. Let them know what's going on. If you get into a situation where you become behind on your rent, just know that one of the procedures that they can do is they can issue you an eviction notice, a notice to vacate, and they have to give you 3 days notice before they file any actual lawsuit in the courts. So if you get that notice, come talk to us and we'll see what we can do and see if there's any way for you to fight it, okay? So you don't want to get in that situation. And that brings me to the choice of roommates. Like, all of us have friends in high school and we think that they're our best friend and we think it would be cool to live with them, but you never really know someone until you actually live with them, right? So if you're going to take on a roommate, you need to know that when you sign a lease, let's say you are rooming with your best friend and y'all come to school together and it doesn't work out for her and she decides to leave, and your apartment is $800 a month. Who's responsible for that next month's bill when it becomes due? Does anybody know? Is it just you, or is it you and your roommate?
Well, depending on what you sign.
Depending on what you sign, you said? Okay. Depends on who's on the lease, right? Okay, so the answer to that question is you guys both are what's called jointly and severally liable. That means if that person leaves early, the landlord can come after you 100% for what's due. So you really have to know when you're taking on a roommate that they're financially able to meet their obligations, and if something goes wrong, they will meet their obligations. Because you're going to end up having to pay out the rest of that lease term. And your only remedy if they don't pay the rent is then going to be to take them to small claims court. So let's say, unfortunately, they have to leave. Well, what information do you need? You need to make sure that you have a forwarding address for them so that you can contact them in case you need to take them to court or you're trying to collect the money. And there's also a sample roommate contract in there. There's things that you want to think about. Who's going to pay the utilities? If we purchase food, is your food going to be yours only, or can I eat some of your cereal and Pop-Tarts and things like that? People get in fights over food. So people start labeling food, and I'm sure some of y'all might have experienced some of that. But you want to talk about things before they happen. If you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, are they allowed to spend the night? And if they do, how many nights can they spend the night in a row? And if they're using extra electricity, are you going to pay more of the water bill or the cable bill? So talk about those things before they become an issue. And like I said, there's a sample contract in there that'll help you think about some of the things that you need to discuss when you have a roommate. Okay, so everything's going fine with the lease, and now you're at the end of the lease and you're getting ready to go. What do you need to do? Okay. One of the things that you need to do is make sure you thoroughly clean everything, right? You always want to leave it better than you found it. Once you've cleaned everything, most of us have, how many of you have smartphones? Probably everybody, right? Make sure you take not only pictures, take pictures of the condition of each room, the carpet, especially the bathroom, the sink, the toilet, the shower, the kitchen, the refrigerator, the stove. Document how you left the apartment. Also take a video. Walk around, take a video of the condition of the apartment, the carpet, the blinds, and everything like that, because that's going to be your proof when the landlord tries to hold on to some of your security deposit, if they do, that you left it in a certain condition. Because those are always a he said, she said type thing. And if you have documented evidence of the condition of the premises, that will take you a long way, because 9 times out of 10, people who end up in small claims court, they don't have that documentation. But people who do often recover. Okay. The other thing that you want to do is, when you give your notice of move out, you're also required to give your forwarding address. Don't forget to give your forwarding address to the landlord. Because when you do that, once you turn in your keys and you vacate the premises, a 30-day clock starts to run. 30 days from the date you turn in your keys and turn over your apartment, your landlord has the duty and obligation to make sure, if they want to keep any of your security deposit, they have to forward you an itemized statement saying why they kept any of it, if they kept a dime, and they have to return that security deposit to you within 30 days. Okay? If they don't return that security deposit to you within 30 days, then you have the right to file a suit in the Justice of the Peace Court or Small Claims Court. It's called a wrongful withholding of security deposit suit. And with a wrongful withholding of the security deposit suit, if they didn't follow the property code, your damages could be your rent plus, your security deposit plus $100. And if they're fines that have operated in bad faith, you can get up to 3 times your security deposit. And bad faith is just defined as not complying with that 30-day rule. So make sure you do your part, though, because if you don't give your forwarding address, then that clock doesn't really start to run, and there's nothing you can really do but to keep asking for it. So you have to provide your forwarding address, make sure that your rent was current when you left, and then you start that clock, that 30-day clock, and then they have to get the security deposit to you. I see new stuff come up all the time. We do a lot of security deposit work, people disputing charges. We're seeing apartments have itemized lists of a certain amount that they charge for cleaning. They'll say we'll automatically charge you $200 for cleaning the carpet. Make sure you look, because a lot of times they give you a list and tell you what they're looking for and what they're going to charge you. And you can ask them what will be charged for each thing, and they usually have a list and they can tell you. And another good thing to do is to request a walkthrough before you leave. You can have the manager walk through the unit with you after you cleaned it, so they can tell you Well, I think this needs a little bit more work. We're probably going to charge you for that. That way you have the opportunity to cure those things before you actually turn over the keys, and you will get more of your money back. But you have to give yourself time. Like a lot of us wait till the last minute. We're supposed to be out when we're in there cleaning until midnight. I'm guilty of that too. So. But if you can get it done a day or two before and then do the walkthrough, then you're in a lot better position. There's some apps out there that can help you. There were 2 apps that were designed by Student Legal Services at Texas State at San Marcos. One is called Lease Lobster, and the other one is called Rent Rhino. And I believe that they're free, and if they're not free, they only cost like 99 cents. They're available for Apple and Android that you can download on your phone. And what they do is they help give you like a checklist to walk you through all the things that you need to know when you move into your apartment and when you move out of your apartment. You can take photos and store it on their server. The inventory that you take is stored on their server so that when you move out, they'll email you those documents. They'll email you the photographs and the pictures so that you have it documented somewhere other than your phone. Because what happens, sometimes we're out jogging by a lake and our phone goes in the lake and it's ruined, right? So all of our stuff that's on our phone is gone. We don't have that anymore. Well, if you use those apps, they store the information for you, and then they're able to give it back to you at the end so that you have it documented through a third-party server of what the condition of your apartment is. They help you find apartments, there's ratings and all that stuff on there, so you can look for those. They're called Lease, Lobster, and Rent Rhino, and if you look on the Student Legal Services web page, there's a link to them on there as well. And they're super cool. And they were designed by people who see people who have landlord-tenant problems every day. So it's a really good tool that you could utilize. In terms of some of the information that I provided you with in your packet, you have a sample roommate contract. You also have a copy of what the inventory and condition form looks like so that you know what to look for. I provided you with the sample TAA lease, so it has a lot of the provisions and stuff that are on there. There's a sample letter that if you need a repair done that you can use. And when you're having one of those health and safety issues, if you're trying to take care of it yourself, one of the things that you need to know is that it's not just good enough to put the letter in writing. It has to be sent certified mail to the apartment complex. So if you look at the sample notice and repair letter, there is a certified return receipt requested number that goes up here. If you go to the post office and you tell the post office that you need to mail something, certified return receipt requested, they'll give you the proper mailing supplies that you need. There's a green card, and then there's a green and white card. And basically what it requires is the landlord actually has to sign for your piece of mail. And then the green card gets mailed back to you, and you have proof that they received your letter. Okay? So that's the sample repair notice. And then there's just some other information in here about things that you need to be aware of, how you protect your rights, frequently asked questions, and then there is also a checklist of things. What to do before, when you move in, when you're living there, and when you're about to move out. So that can help you know what it is that you need to do. Okay, I want to say thank you guys for coming today to our landlord-tenant seminar. And if you can, there's an orange questionnaire in there for your survey for you to fill out. If you could fill that out for me and leave it up here. And also just keep in mind, there's also a brochure for our office. We handle all different types of legal issues. Our office is located on the 4th floor of the student union. We do advice and counsel. We do limited representation. We go to court on occasion, rarely. I had a small claims court case yesterday in Dallas. So any type of legal question you have, make sure you come into the office and let us know, and all of our services are free. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.